Okay, we'll get started with our next session, which is by Radha Mohan Prabhu, Richard Cole, Radha Mohan Prabhu. And he is affiliated with the Bhaktivedanta Manor. And his current research is in the direction of vertical dimension as a correlate of time dilation. The topic topic of the talk is what is Brahmanda and how large is it? A little bit about Radha Mohan Prabhu. He graduated from Manchester University in 1992 and is a member of the Bhaktivedanta Manor community near London. He specializes in media, public relations, interfaith, and drama. He is currently the communications officer at Bhaktivedanta Manor and produces the popular YouTube channel Vedic Science. So let us welcome Radha Mohan Prabhu.
Hi Krishna everyone. So I assume that you can all hear me. So I won't be long with this. I know we're probably running low on time. But yeah, so I'm going to basically be sharing with you my latest YouTube video on my cosmology channel, yet to be released. So this is a bit of a premiere. The visual element is naturally important because I take my cues from it. There are some elements which have already been mentioned today, but I'll skip over those. So if you just bear with me 1 second as I set up, just make sure everything is going well. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to now show my first slide. Okay, let's have a look. Let's see if it does it. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, I assume they can, although I can't hear you for some reason.
Yes, we can hear. I can see it. Yes.
Okay, that's okay, as long as I've got one confirmation. All right, so the title, of course, is Expanding the Brahmanda Universe, as well as looking a little bit into what it is. So now, what is a universe? The Oxford English Dictionary defines it as all existing matter, space, time, and energy regarded collectively. I think it's quite important that we understand what we mean by universe in the English language. With plural, universe is a hypothetical cosmos with particular distinguishing properties, an alternative or subjective reality. It can also mean an independent star system, like a galaxy, and certainly that was the case before the 1920s. Of course, unless otherwise stated, translations and commentaries by, of course, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who else? In his class in San Francisco in 1968 on the Bhagavatam 1.3.1-3. So how these Brahmandas, or universes, each of them has a predominant deity. He is called Brahma, Brahmanda, the master of this Brahmanda. Brahmanda, Brahma's egg, it can be translated as. That which is created by a particular Lord Brahma, which includes both gross and subtle matter, incidentally. All things in this single Brahmanda originate from this Lord Brahma. Subtle bodies come first in the creation, as we've actually been hearing about, and grosser comes later. Now what is a Brahmanda? It basically can be summarized as a sphere half full of the watery Garbhodaka ocean, but in the top half, there's the horizontal disc across the middle called Brahmandala, and of course the vertical dimension of this includes 14 planetary divisions or systems, and as we go further up towards Brahmaloka at the top, we become more divine, so to speak. At the center of all this is Mount Meru, adjacent to planet Earth. And the entire Brahmanda is surrounded by elemental layers, each time 10 times thicker than the previous. Actually, the Brahmanda is formed by a condensation of elements, starting as the most subtle and then gets grosser. And I believe all the elements are present into one degree or one proportion or another within all the planetary systems. Bhagavatam 5.21.11 Prabhupada's purport. Each universe is covered by various layers of material elements, and therefore we cannot see from one universe to another. In other words, whatever we see is within this one universe. I was on a morning walk in April 1974, Bombay, probably on the Juhu beach there. Giriraj says, so at night when we look up, everything that we see is within this universe. Prabhupada, yes, within this universe. And there are innumerable universes. However, he does not necessarily certainly refer to looking up with the use of modern telescopes in this context, although he may do, but that's up to us to decide. His introduction to Bhagavatam 520. The distance between the sun and the circumference of Andagolaka, the globe of the universe, is estimated to be 25 koti yojanas, which is about 2 billion miles. So you see, it's a very, very small figure compared with modern standards. I want to explore that a little bit further. That scale is obviously usually problematic. So here's the little drawing that I've done of the Brahmanda universe. But let's use an example. Let's close in on here. And geocentric, if we put the Earth at the center, I mean, they say that Uranus is about 1.98 billion miles, physical miles from the Earth. So saying that the whole universe has a radius of 2 billion is, of course, on the scale of the solar system, not of what we would call the universe in modern terms. Let's use another example. Let's close in on here. Now, according to the 5th canto, Dhruvaloka's vertical height above the Earth is just over 30 million miles. That's if we define Dhruvaloka as the pole star meaning fixed. So there's definitely a connection there. But now then, if you imagine, however, that we would see the pole star, in fact, we see all stars as no more than a mere, well, a dot of light in space. Now, 30 million miles is not actually that far, relatively speaking. It would have to be no more than perhaps a European country in its size for that to, according to the laws of physics anyway, maybe no more than the UK perhaps, as a whole star. So we have a problem here with our small universe. Another good example, the largest red giant in our galaxy, in modern science anyway, the UY Scuti, they say it's nearly 1.5 billion miles in diameter. So it hardly, if we had a literally physical 4 billion mile Brahmanda universe, we'd all be burned up pretty quickly by our friend there. I kind of like these visual elements. That's why I make these YouTube videos. A final example, NASA calculates that as of February 2018, Voyager 1 is roughly just over 13.2 billion miles now from the Earth. And Voyager 2 is roughly about 11 billion miles from the Earth. So already this 4 billion mile universe is it's defeated, really. So how can this be? No way. Let's start digging. Let's look at this in a different way. Let's explore the Siddhantic size of the universe, the Surya Siddhanta and the Siddhanta Shrimani as well. Now, Prabhupada's purport to the Chaitanya Charitamrita Majjhila 1284 reads, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, one of the greatest astrologers of his time, gives information from the Siddhanta Shrimani that this universe measures, oh goodness me, 18 quadrillion 0.7.12 times 8 miles. This is the circumference of this universe. According to some, this is only half the universe. Now, it's generally accepted that the Siddhantas use a yojana value of 5 miles. However, in that purport, Srila Prabhupada clearly says 8 miles per yojana. So looking at the size of the Brahmanda to Siddhanta, multiply the number of revolutions of the moon in a kalpa by the moon's orbit. The sun's rays reach as far as this. That is the size of this Brahmanda universe. If we look at Surya Siddhanta 1290, we use the calculation of the circumference. So it's 18.712 quadrillion yojanas. So if we translate that in modern terms, not saying what is right, what is wrong, but we superimpose that upon the modern size of the galaxy. And Sariputta Prabhu calculates that its radius comes to about 5,065 light years, a diameter, of course, double that of 10,130 light years. And given that the estimated size of our galaxy is about 100,000 light years, it would look a little bit like this. If the circumference is doubled, like Prabhupada mentions earlier, it comes to a diameter of about 20,361 light years. But of course, as we've been hearing today, there's the elemental layers to consider. Bhagavatam 3.11.41 purport. The coverings of the universe is also constituted of the elements of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and each is 10 times thicker than the one before. The first covering of the universe is earth, and it is 10 times thicker than the universe itself. If the universe is 4 billion miles in size, then the size of the covering of the universe is 4 billion miles times 10. So let's try and visualize that. So the initial 4 billion, 2 billion from the Earth would take us just beyond Uranus, as mentioned, but of course you have to, the first layer will be 40 billion miles thick, and then you've got to add the 7 layers. So here's using a few pictures here, superimposing on the modern understanding at least. And where do we get? All those 7 layers added together would reach about 44 quadrillion miles from the Earth. I'm not going to go into the figures too much here, which is about 15,120.6 light years in diameter. Interesting that that figure is between the standard and the double size of the Siddhantic universe. Note that the standard Siddhantic diameter of 10,130 light years is from the 7 layers. So you have to times that by 10 to get, then you get 101,300 light years. So actually something there fairly similar to the size of the modern galaxy in modern estimations. Bhagavatam 248 purport. There are innumerable universes, and all of them together are known as the created material world. Now, please note, it's worth noting that many Brahmandas of different sizes, similarly, there are many galaxies of different sizes. So are Brahmandas the same as galaxies, or at least from a material point of view? That would actually give weight to the theory of relating to the big bounce, the idea that the entire cosmos is expanding and then contracting, but then expanding again, bouncing up and down. This perhaps could be argued as being similar to Mahavishnu's breathing. We've been learning a little bit about Mahavishnu earlier today. He breathes in and out innumerable Brahmandas. Absolutely. So let's get on to the second part now of my presentation. Devotees' theories on the scale of the Brahmanda's vertical axis. Theory 1, scriptural proportionality. This was explored over the last few months actually by Dvija Govinda Prabhu and I, and he'll be talking in more detail, I believe, about that later. Anyway, this theory takes into consideration the proportionality coefficient between the Puranic and Siddhantic sizes of the universe. Let me explain. So, looking up, of course, the radius of the Brahmanda, therefore not to literally 2 billion physical miles from the Earth, but try converting that to 10,180 light years, which is the radius of the double Siddhantic universe, to try to proportionally change that. If that was the case, the 7 sages, which of course we known as the Big Dipper, described in the 5th canto, would be about 103.9 light years. Okay, the Brigu is called sometimes. The brightest star in the group is very similar. They say modern astronomers would say that is 104 light years away in modern calculations, and therefore this is a meaningful result. However, as Dvija Govinda Prabhu confirmed actually that the Graha planets and the Nakshastras would actually not apply to this at all, that then the maths goes completely skew with, I'm afraid. So let's move to theory 2, efforts and pathways of the great yogis. And this, of course, is relating to consciousness. First of all, the value of the yoginas were traditionally based on an oxen pulling the royal cart. In fact, basically, in one day, the average oxen could do about 8 miles a day, apparently, but it would have to make 2 journeys, have to come home again. But it's 8 miles you can get away. But the cosmic vertical direction is very different context to horizontal journeys on the Earth by an oxen. It's a different context completely. This vertical direction of the Brahmanda may be more to do with levels of consciousness, together with experience of time, proportion of gross and subtle elements in the body, and a degree of sattva guna. Again, this is following on from what we've been hearing about earlier today. Now, could a single vertical yojana represent the distance covered by the mental effort of a yogi, i.e., the same relative effort a bull makes to pull a cart in one day? But this theory is very, very similar to the writings of Rishiraj Prabhu, in particular, my understanding of his book, Mystic Universe. Not exactly the same, but very, very strikingly similar. Even Sadhaputta does actually support this view. For example, he says, in Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy, chapter 6, the universal globe and beyond, Sadhaputta writes, the 2 billion mile distance is referring to this distance as it would be perceived by the demigods, yogis, and rishis who can actually make this trip. He continues, the rate of passage of time is much slower on Satyaloka or Brahmaloka than it is on the earth. We suggested there might also be a comparable transformation of space in the region of Satyaloka. Thus, while a yogi traveling to Satyaloka may experience that he is crossing 2 billion miles, from our point of view, from our experience, he might be covering a much greater distance. And on that note, we're now going to add that vital ingredient, adding the inevitable time dimension. Brings us on to theory 3, inverse distance time proportion. This is also Adrija Govinda and I did also explore this together a few months ago. The size of the universe is differently perceived at different locus. This theory suggests that the perceived size is inversely proportional to the lifespans at different cosmic levels. For example, the inhabitants of Brahmaloka perceive the smallest universe, a universe of only 4 billion miles in diameter. Let's get some, however, at this point, we need more support, I think, from Srila Prabhupada. He said to Samasundar Prabhu in 1972 in Los Angeles, with your relative body, your duration of life, your knowledge, your perception, everything is relative. So you are a teeny human being. What is impossible for you is not impossible for others. In his purport, Bhagavatam 3.11.4, time and space are correlative terms. And if time and space are perceived differently, different levels in the universe, can that be also be the same for the perception of distances and travel? In other words, if a 4 billion miles is the diameter of this universe as experienced by Lord Brahma, what could it be to us? Of course, Lord Brahma's experience of calculated is a rate of something like 3.11 trillion times slower than it would be to us on Earth. So let's try this calculation, for example, 4 billion miles times 3.11 trillion in this theory gives us the diameter of the Brahmanda from our point of view. So if we do that with our calculator and add a few zeros to work that one out, we reach a figure of about 2.17 billion light years in diameter. In modern astronomy, that would be about 5 times the size of Laniakea supercluster, of which our galaxy is a tiny part. So actually, at this point, we're dealing with a substantially sized universe, even by modern terms. But we're not finished. Theory 4. The universe may be surrounded by a huge hall of mirrors and not be as large as it seems. Beyond a point, we may be seeing reflections of our own group of galaxies. Space might act like a cosmic hall of mirrors, revealing multiple images of the same light sources. A good quote here, astronomer Jean-Paul Luminet at the Paris Observatory called this theory crumpled space. I won't to attempt a French accent here, although originally I tried, but I'll probably refrain from embarrassing myself. And but he said, we see a sky filled with galaxies, but its aspect does not make it possible to decide if the farther galaxies are not ghost images of closer galaxies. The assumption of a multi-connected universe cannot be discarded. The universe could appear vast to us, unfolded, while it could actually be much smaller and folded up. Just to visualize this, imagine this rather large piece of paper in front of that student there represents the space-time universe. But crumpled space, it'd be the same piece of paper, but crumpled up into a much smaller area, if it's space and time together. Theory 5, how to expand very large. So let's try to make our universe as big as it can be. So try regarding the standard scale of the Siddhantic universe. Try regarding the standard scale of the Siddhantic universe as the Brahmanda, which means then you can add 7 layers to it. And this, at this point, we really do get very large indeed. Now there's the supercluster there. We get bigger than that, and we get about 7 layers. We actually reach a radius of 5.05 billion light years. Now remember, if you're dealing with radius, you're actually looking back in time that far. You're looking back in time 5.05 1.05 billion years ago. And that would actually take us, interestingly, during the first half of Lord Brahma's previous night. Now, with 8 layers, it comes to about 101 billion light years. Now, note that the modern estimates for the diameter of the entire egg-shaped cosmos is at about 93 billion light years, so pretty similar. And we're looking back in time in this case, although this is beyond the observable universe. But if we could look back that back, it would actually be nearly 6 days ago for Lord Brahma. If we remember, we're looking back in time here. Now, 6 days of creation. Now, that certainly rings a bell, comparing the Abrahamic God of Genesis there with Lord Brahma. At least they both got beards, something in common there. Just something to think about, although how that fits in is perhaps a matter of discussion. So now some concluding thoughts. In Danavir Goswami's commentaries on the 5th canto, we read, in Vira Bhargava's commentary on the Bhagavatam 5.2038, the learned say that the earth is 500 million yojanas, 4 billion miles. Earth is to be taken here as a Brahmanda. This is evidence that sometimes different uses and scales are used. Vira Bhargava, incidentally, is from the Ramanuja Sampradaya. In Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 2391, Prabhupada translates Brahmanda Mandala as all of the universes. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 19151 purport, we read, when we speak of Brahmanda, we refer to the whole universe, or to the cluster of many millions of universes. So finally, I just wanted to touch on the fractal cosmology theory. And what this I'm suggesting here, perhaps this could relate to the Vedic or Puranic perception as well, the idea that the structure of the universe is a fractal across a wide range of scales, as above, so below. The macrocosm and the microcosm may be based on the ability and intention of the observer. And a similar phenomenon with different scales that we find of Vishnu forms. For example, obviously Mahavishnu there, Garbhadakshay Vishnu, and Shiradakshay Vishnu within the heart. There's our yogi there, sitting up straight. Of course, imagine these chakras perhaps even resembling the different planetary systems. There you go. So I will now stop sharing as I've finished my presentation. Okay, thank you very much indeed for listening, and hope you enjoyed some of the images that I shared there and some of the concepts as well.